The ballroom smelled like every hotel ballroom Daniel had ever stood in. Carpet cleaner and warm catering trays. A chandelier working too hard to make folding tables look like something. He'd almost not come. Carol had a cold, nothing serious, but she'd waved him off from the couch with a box of tissues and a look that said, "Go, I'll be fine. Bring me back a story." He hadn't expected to bring one back like this. He saw her before he placed her. That was the strange part. Recognition arriving in the body before the mind caught up. A woman by the drinks table, laughing at something with her head tipped back just slightly, one hand resting on her collarbone, the way she used to when something caught her off guard. 40 years disappeared in the time it took him to blink. Renee. He stood there a second too long, drink sweating in his hand, doing the math nobody wants to do out loud. 40 years. 40 years, and she still laughed with her whole face. She turned. Their eyes caught across the room the way a hook catches. Not violent, just sudden. And then you're not going anywhere until someone decides to move. She said something to the person beside her, set down her glass, and started toward him. He should have moved first. He didn't. "Danny Cole," she said, close enough now that he could hear the smile in it before he saw it fully form. "I'd know that terrible posture anywhere." Renee. Her name came out rougher than he meant it to. "You still remember how to make an entrance." "I remember a lot of things." She looked at him, really looked, the kind of look that catalogs a face against an old photograph. "You got old, Cole." "So did you." Rude. But she was grinning now, and something in his chest loosened that he hadn't known was tight. "You look good, though. Married life good. Where's the wife?" "Home. Cold." He gestured vaguely, like Carol might materialize from the air if he pointed hard enough. 22 years this June." 22. Renee let out a low whistle. "Look at you. Somebody's whole life." "And you?" Something moved behind her eyes. Quick, like a cloud crossing and gone. "Divorced. 2 years now. It's fine. Good, actually. Took me a while to say that, and mean it." She waved a hand, brushing it off before he could land on it. "Not what I came over here to talk about." "What did you come over here to talk about?" "I came over here," she said, stepping half a step closer, close enough that he caught the same perfume, or near enough to it that his memory filled in the rest, "to ask if you still can't dance." He laughed, surprised out of himself. "I could never dance." "You could. You just wouldn't. There's a difference." She tilted her head toward the little dance floor, where a handful of gray-haired couples were swaying to something slow and forgettable. 40 years, Cole. I think you owe me 1 dance for every decade." "That's 4 dances. I'll take 1 as a down payment." He should have said Carol's name again. He should have said, "I really shouldn't." Should have found the easy laugh that turns a moment like this into nothing at all. Instead, he found himself setting his glass down on the nearest table, telling himself it was just a dance, just an old friend, just 40 years of catching up compressed into 3 minutes of a song neither of them would remember the name of. "It's just a dance," he told himself. "You dance at weddings. You dance with your daughter-in-law at Christmas. This is nothing." But his hand, when it found the small of her back, remembered something his mind had filed away as gone. Neither of them said anything for the first few bars. She fit against him the way a returning habit fits. Not perfectly, not like riding a bike, but close enough that his body kept making small corrections without asking his permission. "You still hum when you're thinking," she said finally, quiet, almost to herself. "Do I?" "You did it just now. 3rd bar in." She looked up at him. "Some things don't change." 40 years is a long time for something not to change. Is it? Or is it just long enough to forget what stayed the same? He didn't have an answer for that. The song kept going, unhurried, and he was aware, too aware, of the exact places where they touched. Her hand in his palm at her back, the half-inch of space between them that neither of them was closing, and neither of them was widening either. "I looked you up once," she said. "Years ago. Before all this." She tipped her chin, meaning the internet, meaning everything. "Got so easy. I wanted to know if you were happy." "Was I?" "Looked like it. Golf course pictures. A dog." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach the rest of her face this time. "I was glad. I want you to know that. I was glad, even though some ugly little part of me wished you weren't." Daniel felt something shift in his chest. Not desire, not yet. Just the ache of an old door being tried at the hinges. "Renee, I'm not saying anything by it," she said quickly. "I'm just being honest. We're too old to lie to each other, don't you think? At least about the easy stuff." "What's the easy stuff?" "That I thought about you more than I should have. That's easy. That's not a crime." Her eyes held his. The hard stuff is everything after that sentence. The song ended. Neither of them stepped back right away. Around them, the room kept moving. Someone's laugh too loud near the bar. A slideshow of old yearbook photos looping on a screen by the stage. A version of all of them at 20 flickering past, while the real, older version stood still in the middle of the floor. "I should let you go," she said finally, stepping back, smoothing a hand down her dress like she was smoothing something else back into place. "You've got a wife with a cold waiting on a story." "I do." "Tell her I said hello. Tell her—" Renee paused, and something flickered across her face that she didn't finish naming. "Tell her she got a good one." "I will." She turned to go, back toward the drinks table, back toward the rest of the room, and Daniel felt the pull of it, the way you feel a wave receding under your feet, the sand shifting, the ground not quite where it was a second ago. She stopped after 3 steps, turned back. "I'm not staying at the hotel bar tonight," she said. "Too loud in there. I was going to walk the quad, see if the old bench by the science building is still standing, for old times." She shrugged, light, like it cost her nothing to say. "Walk me out?" Daniel's hand was already reaching for his coat before he'd decided anything at all. The night air outside was sharp enough to clear his head, or it should have been. Daniel pulled his coat tighter and told himself that was all this was. A walk, a courtesy, the kind of thing you did for an old friend, so she didn't have to cross a dark campus alone. Nothing about it needed a second thought. He gave it a second thought anyway, and a third. "It hasn't changed as much as I expected," Renee said, looking up at the old brick buildings, their windows dark and gold-lit in patches. "I thought it would feel smaller. Everything from when you're young feels smaller when you go back. This doesn't. Maybe it just knows how to hold its size. Maybe." She glanced sideways at him. "You always did say things like that. Half philosophy, half a way of not answering the question." "What question?" "Exactly." They walked without a destination that either of them named, though both of them knew where their feet were headed. The long way, past the library, along the path that cut behind the science building, toward the bench that had sat under the same elm tree for as long as either of them had been alive to notice it. "Tell me what happened," Daniel said, before he could decide whether he wanted to know. "After. I never got the whole story, just that you were gone." Renee was quiet for a moment, her breath showing pale in the cold. "My father got transferred. Ohio, then Michigan, a year after that. It happened fast. 3 weeks from when he told us to, when we left. I wrote you a letter explaining everything, address, timeline, all of it. Begged you to write back before I lost my nerve to send it. I never got a letter. I know that now. Something tightened around her mouth. Found out years later. My mother never mailed it. She didn't think a college boy from your background was worth the postage, if I'm being blunt about it. I didn't find out until she was dying and felt like confessing things. Daniel stopped walking. Renee. I know. She kept her eyes forward, on the path. I spent a long time being angry about it. Then a longer time trying not to be, because anger doesn't unmail a letter. It just sits in you and rots. I decided somewhere around 40 that I'd rather grieve it clean than carry it dirty. I waited, he said quietly. For a while. I want you to know that. It wasn't nothing to me either. I know that too. Or I hoped it. She finally looked at him. It's a strange thing, finding out 40 years later that the story you told yourself about your own life had a hole in it the whole time. They started walking again, slower now. The silence between them not empty but full, the kind that comes after something true has been said, and both people are still standing in the space it left. Tell me about him, Daniel said. Your husband, ex-husband. Not much to tell. Good man for a long time. Wrong life for both of us, it turned out. But we didn't figure that out until the kids were grown, and there was nothing left to distract us from it. She shrugged, but it wasn't as light as she wanted it to look. No villain in the story, just two people who married the shape of a life instead of each other, and one day noticed. That sounds lonelier than a villain would. It is. A villain gives you somewhere to put the blame. She glanced at him. What about you and Carol? 22 years. That's not nothing. It's a good marriage, Daniel said, and meant it, and was aware, uncomfortably, of how carefully he was choosing the words, like a man walking a floor he wasn't sure would hold. Steady, kind. We built something real. That's not really an answer to what I asked. What did you ask? I asked what it is, not what it is not. She said it gently, no edge in it, just an old friend noticing an old habit. You always did that too. Described things by their outline instead of their center. He didn't have a quick answer for that, and she didn't push. They'd reached the bench. It sat exactly where memory said it would, iron-framed. Wood slats gone silver gray, with decades of winters. The elm above it bare-branched now, instead of the green canopy it had worn the last time either of them sat there. Neither of them said anything about that. They didn't need to. Renee sat first, drawing her coat around her knees. Daniel stood a moment before lowering himself down beside her. Leaving, he told himself deliberately, a careful, respectable distance between them. Last time I sat here, she said, looking not at him, but out at the dark quad. You had something in your coat pocket you kept touching all through dinner. You never took it out. Daniel felt his stomach drop, quiet and slow, like a stone finding the bottom of a lake it had been sinking through for 40 years. You noticed that. I notice everything about that week. It's the week I've replayed more than any other week of my life, and I've had a lot of weeks since. She turned to look at him now, and there wasn't anything playful left in her face, just something old and unguarded. Was it what I think it was? He didn't answer right away. The cold moved through the space between them, and neither of them moved to close it, and neither of them moved to widen it either. Both of them just sitting there, still, on the same bench, 40 years and one unmailed letter later, waiting to see which one of them would say it first. It was a ring, Daniel said finally. The words came out smaller than he meant them to, like they'd been kept somewhere airtight for 40 years and had lost some of their shape in storage. I'd bought it that spring. I was going to ask you after graduation, once I had a job lined up. Once I had something real to offer you, instead of just plans. Renee's breath caught, visible in the cold air, a small white ghost of a sound. Danny. I carried it around for 3 weeks after you left. Told myself I was waiting for the right moment to mail it to you, or bring it to you, I don't even know which. Then your letters stopped coming. Because there weren't any, I know that now. And I told myself you'd moved on, found someone else, and I put it in a drawer, and I didn't look at it again for about 10 years. What happened to it? I don't know. Lost in a move, probably. Doesn't matter. He looked down at his own hands, empty in his lap. I'm not telling you this to make either of us feel something we shouldn't. I'm telling you because you asked, and because you were right. I do describe things by their outline. I think I've been doing it about that ring for 40 years. Renee didn't say anything. Her hand, resting on the cold wood of the bench between them, moved. Not toward him exactly, more like it forgot to hold its ground, and slid the last few inches until it rested against his. Neither of them looked at their hands. Both of them were entirely aware of nothing else. I should go back inside, Daniel said, and didn't move. You should, Renee agreed, and didn't move either. The elm above them creaked once in a small wind. Somewhere back across the quad, faint music still drifted from the ballroom, a song neither of them could name from this distance, softened by all the walls and windows between here and there. Renee, her name again, and this time it came out like a question he didn't have the rest of. She turned her head. He was already turned toward her. He wasn't sure when that had happened. Her eyes searched his face the way they had at 20, except nothing about either of them was 20 anymore, and somehow that made it heavier, not lighter. Two people who knew exactly what they were choosing, if they chose it. Tell me to stop, she said quietly. If you want me to stop, tell me now, because I don't think I can be the one to say it. He didn't tell her to stop. Her hand came up, slow, giving him every chance to lean back, to laugh it off, to stand and say goodnight and walk back across the quad, a careful, faithful man. He didn't take any of those chances. Her fingers found the side of his face, cold from the night air, and he felt his own breath go unsteady in a way it hadn't in years. The space between them closed the way water closes over a stone. Quiet, complete, no sound at all. The kiss was brief, softer than he expected, and sadder somehow, like it carried the weight of everything that hadn't happened instead of just what was happening now. Her hand at his jaw. His breath caught somewhere between his chest and his throat, and then it was over, both of them pulling back at nearly the same instant, as if some shared, buried instinct had fired in them both at once. Daniel sat back, and the cold rushed back into the space where her warmth had been, and with it came everything else. Carol's face, clear and sudden, her hand on his arm at the door. Bring me back a story. And God, what a story this would be if he ever told the true version of it. His chest was doing something complicated. Guilt arriving late and enormous, longing right behind it, refusing to leave room. And underneath both of them, a grief so old he'd forgotten its name until just now. He pressed the heel of his hand briefly against his eyes, not crying, just needing the dark for a second. I shouldn't have, he started. Don't, Renee said, gently, not unkindly. Don't apologize yet. Just sit with it a second before you decide what it was. They sat. The music from the ballroom kept drifting, thin and far away, like it belonged to some other night that had nothing to do with this one. I need to think, Daniel finally managed. I don't know what I need, Renee. That's the truth of it. I know. She was watching him, her own face unreadable now, carefully so, like she'd built the wall back up fast so he wouldn't see what was behind it. I'm not going to chase you for an answer tonight. That's not what tonight was. What was tonight? Renee looked at him a long moment, the cold air moving between them, 40 years and one kiss, settled now into the same small distance. I don't know either, she said quietly. Was that a mistake, Danny? Or was that the thing we never got to have? He didn't answer her. He couldn't. Not with anything that would have been true and kind at the same time. So he did the only thing that felt survivable. He stood, said something about the cold and the hour that neither of them believed, and walked back across the quad alone, her silhouette staying still on the bench behind him until the dark swallowed it. The hotel room was too quiet when he got there. He sat on the edge of the bed, still in his coat, phone in his hand, Carol's contact photo glowing up at him, her laughing at something off camera, taken 2 summers ago at his brother's lake house. He pressed his thumb near the call button and didn't press it. What would you even say? He set the phone face down on the nightstand, like that would help. He got up, paced the small stretch of carpet between the bed and the window, sat back down. The ring came back to him in flashes he hadn't let himself have in decades. The little velvet box, the drawer he'd hidden it in, the exact weight of carrying something you were too afraid to give away. He'd built a whole marriage, a whole good life, without ever quite closing that door. He saw that now, sitting in a hotel room 300 miles from that life, with the taste of another woman's grief still somewhere behind his ribs. You love Carol. That much wasn't in question, hadn't been in question in 22 years. But loving her had never required him to reckon with what he'd buried before she ever entered the picture. Tonight had made him reckon with it whether he wanted to or not. He thought about calling his son, of all people, grown now, a father himself, someone who'd tell him plainly that he was an old fool and to go to bed. He didn't call him either. Instead, he lay back on top of the covers, still dressed, and let the argument run its full course in the dark. You didn't ask for tonight. True. You didn't stop it either. Also true. One kiss isn't a marriage undone. Maybe. But it's not nothing. And pretending it's nothing is its own kind of lie. That one landed hardest, because it was the one he recognized. The same instinct that had let him describe his marriage tonight by its outline instead of its center. Steady, kind, real, all true, and none of it the whole truth of what he felt, sitting across from a woman who still remembered which bar of a song made him hum. He didn't sleep so much as drift through the same 4 or 5 thoughts on a loop until the window began to gray with early light. By morning, something in him had settled. Not resolved, not exactly, but settled the way sediment settles in water left still long enough. He knew 2 things clearly. He was going home to Carol today, and he was not going to carry last night home with him unspoken, buried the way he'd buried the ring for 40 years. Whatever this cost him, hiding was no longer a door he was willing to walk through. But before he left campus, there was one thing he needed to do on his own terms. Not the reunions, not the benches, not the darks. He found Renee at the continental breakfast in the hotel lobby, alone at a corner table, turning a coffee cup slowly on its saucer without drinking from it. She looked up when he approached, and something in her face braced itself before he'd even spoken. "I'm not staying," he said. "I wanted to say goodbye properly. Not like last night." "Okay." Her voice was careful, guarded in a way it hadn't been on the bench. "I'm going home to Carol. I'm going to tell her the truth. Not every detail. She doesn't need every detail. But the truth. That I saw you. That it meant something. That I need to be honest with her about what I've never fully closed." He held her gaze. "I needed you to hear that from me, not read it in some careful silence if we ever crossed paths again." Renee was quiet a long moment. Then she nodded. Slow, like something in her was settling too. "That's the right thing, Danny. It's more than I expected, if I'm honest. I owe you a real goodbye. I don't think I gave you one 40 years ago. I don't want to make that mistake twice." Her eyes were bright, but she held them steady. "Then let this be it. A real one." She reached out, not for his hand this time, just a brief, light touch to his forearm, the kind two old friends give each other at the end of something. "Go home, Danny. Go be the man who came back to tell the truth. That's worth more than the one who almost didn't." He nodded, throat tight, and turned toward the door before either of them could find another sentence to stand in front of. Behind him, he heard her chair creak as she sat back down, and he didn't look back to see her face. The drive home stretched 4 hours through flat highway and gray morning light, and every mile of it, Daniel rehearsed a conversation he had no script for, only the plain, frightening intention to finally have it. Carol was on the couch when he walked in, tissues still scattered on the side table, a mug of cold tea forgotten beside her. She looked up, and her face did the thing it always did when he came home. A small, unguarded brightening, the kind of welcome that had nothing performed in it. "There he is," she said, voice still thick with the cold. "Tell me everything. Who's fat now? Who's bald? Who tried to sell you on a pyramid scheme in the parking lot?" He almost laughed. He set his bag down slowly instead, and something in his stillness must have reached her before his words did, because her smile faded into something more careful. "Daniel?" He sat down across from her, not beside her. He wanted to see her face for this, wanted her to see his. "I need to tell you about the reunion, all of it, and I need you to let me get through it before you say anything, because if you stop me part way, I don't think I'll find my way back to finishing it." Carol's hands went still in her lap. She nodded, once, bracing without knowing yet for what. So, he told her. Not every detail. Some things belonged only to him and to a bench under an elm tree, and some griefs weren't his to hand over, just to lighten his own load. But he told her about Renee, about the ring he'd carried 40 years ago and never given away, hidden in a drawer of himself he hadn't opened even to her, about the walk, the bench, the kiss, and the long night afterward, where he'd lain awake and finally understood what he'd never let either of them look at directly. Carol listened without moving, her face unreadable in a way that frightened him more than anger would have. When he finished, the silence stretched long enough that he thought he might have broken something that wouldn't go back together. 22 years, she said finally, quiet. "And you never told me there was a ring?" I didn't know how. I don't think I let myself remember it most days. It took seeing her again to understand I'd been carrying a door shut inside myself the whole time we've been married. And now? Now it's open. And what's on the other side of it is you. Carol, not because I'm choosing you over some door I've finally shut, because I looked through it, all the way through, and what I found there was grief for something old, not a life I actually wanted, instead of this one. He reached for her hand, and she let him take it, though her fingers stayed stiff a moment before they softened. I came home to close that door, honestly, instead of just leaving it locked and pretending it was never there. You deserved that. You've deserved that for 22 years. Carol was quiet a long while, turning his hand over in hers, studying it the way you study something familiar. You're suddenly seeing new. "I'm not going to pretend that didn't hurt to hear," she said finally. "It did. It does." Her eyes found his, steady despite the wet shine in them. "But you drove 4 hours to tell me the truth, instead of carrying it home, quiet and safe. That's not nothing, Daniel. That's not nothing at all. I couldn't do us that way. Not after last night showed me what carrying a locked door for 40 years costs a person." She managed something close to a smile, small and tired and real. Well, you always were terrible at outlines, and better at endings than you gave yourself credit for. He laughed, a real laugh, the tightness in his chest finally loosening its grip, and pulled her hand to his mouth, pressing a kiss to her knuckles, the way he had on their wedding day. 40 years and one long overdue conversation later. Outside, the ordinary evening went on being ordinary. A neighbor's dog barking, a car passing slow down the street. And inside, two people who had built a real life out of steady, unremarkable choices sat holding hands in the fading light, having just made one more. It wasn't the story he'd set out that weekend to bring home, but it was the true one, and in the end, that was the story that mattered.